Hello, folks. How you doing? Welcome to the Art Gallery of Western Australia. If you are standing, there's still plenty of seats over on this side, so don't feel that you have to stand over there uncomfortably. Move over, take a seat, get comfortable. And I'd like to welcome you to the inaugural Pulse Forum, an empty canvas, a future without creatives. I'm Ben O'Shea from the West Australian, and it's my pleasure to be your MC tonight. This evening, global futurist Anders Sörman-Nilsson will lead an expert panel exploring a very topical subject. What's at risk if we move forward into a future that doesn't value human creativity? But first, I'd like to introduce Kim Collard to perform a welcome to country. Kim Collard is a Balladong Whadjuk man of the Noongar Nation and is one of a handful of fluent language speakers of the Balladong dialect. Kim is the CEO of Kuya Consultancy, an education and training provider that was established in the year 2000 and is an elder of the Whadjuk people. In keeping with this year's NAIDOC theme for our elders and following Aboriginal protocols, AGWA has great pleasure in welcoming Whadjuk Noongar elder Mr. Kim Collard to the stage to give us the welcome to country.
Thank you very much, Ben, and that was probably the most excited I've ever been introduced, so absolute pleasure. I'd like to begin first by acknowledging or thanking the Art Gallery of Western Australia for following correct Aboriginal protocols and acknowledging and recognising the traditional custodian, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation whose land we stand upon. For those who don't know, Whadjuk are the traditional custodians of Perth, and the Noongar Nation are the people of the southwest of Western Australia. So those who know the geography, if you were to draw a line just south of Geraldton to as far as Esperance, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Noongar country, yeah? Our role as traditional custodians is to look after you, to care for you, and indeed to nurture you, right? And we take that responsibility very seriously. And as a result of that, we leave you in the capable, competent hands of Colin and the Art Gallery WA team to look after your every needs this evening. Yeah? The West Australian Art Gallery, Maya, for the 2023 Pulse Forum. Hello and welcome everybody, ladies and gentlemen, all right, to the Art Gallery of Western Australia, all right, for the 2023 Pulse Forum. We are sitting on Whadjuk land. I say to you that our ancestors, our grandmothers' feet have travelled this land for thousands and thousands of years, and it's the tracks of our ancestors that we still continue to follow today. Mawakan Yakul, the Art Gallery of Western Australia, for the 2023 Pulse Forum. Our ancestors' eyes are very, very happy to see many people come, and indeed artists, ladies and gentlemen, to the Art Gallery of Western Australia for the 2023 Pulse Forum. Barbary ni jinung rabuja, welcome in Banan Waja the Quail Swan River, ni Jaman Quail, Darby Yeraganyay, Barbary ni jinung rabuja, welcome in Balam Yera Walichman, ni jinung rabuja, ni Jawajak Buja. I say to you that our God, our Creator, is the rainbow serpent, the Walgal. Non-Aboriginal people call that place the Swan River. The Noongar name for that place is called the Derwal Yerrigan. So rivers, sea, rivers, wetlands, waterways, our God, all right, she inhabits those places, and tonight she looks over you and protects you like an eagle, whilst you're on Noongar country, whilst you're on Whadjuk country. So just again, in conclusion, can I just thank the Art Gallery, all right, for following correct Aboriginal protocols. As Ben said tonight, we have a keynote speaker, or keynote address by Anders Sörman-Nilsson. So we extend a very, very warm welcome to our special guest tonight, along with the panel members who are going to be talking about that topic, an empty canvas, a future without creatives. And I want to acknowledge our little Noongar panel member, Cezera. Where are you, Cezera? There you go. Yeah, so welcome, my sweetheart. So just in conclusion, I bring with me well wishes from the elders of the Southwest Aboriginal Land and Sea Council in wishing you well, all right, in your deliberations this evening. So welcome. Please give my apologies. I have to leave because it's my granddaughter's 3rd birthday, so I've got to go. So I'd love to stay with you, but have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim Collard. And now a bit of housekeeping before we get underway. The bathrooms are located near the front airlock and at the back behind the spiral staircase. Please feel free to reach out to one of the AGWA team members if you have any access requirements. As I'm welcoming AGWA Director Colin Walker to the stage, I'd like you to take a moment and watch this short video about the Pulse Youth Festival. Tonight's event forms part of the West Australian Pulse 2023 exhibition, which celebrates the bold ideas and amazing visual artworks of Year 12 high school students from here in WA. You can see Pulse upstairs in Gallery 6, and you still have time to vote in the People's Choice Awards. This year, AGWA has amplified its youth program to include all creative art forms, and this video captures the youth quake that will continue at the gallery until August. Let's take a look. Fantastic. That's amazing. And now please put your hands together and welcome to the stage AGWA Director Colin Walker.
Great, thanks, Ben. Welcome everyone to the Art Gallery of Western Australia, situated on the land of the Whadjuk people of Noongar Nation. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and thanks, Kim, for that welcome to country. Tonight's Pulse Forum actually sold out quicker than any event since I've been here. So people really are either desperate to be inspired or basically just terrified with the pace of change in tech and AI and what all this means. Because AI is not a new kid on the block, but I think it is a really misunderstood one. But in the past year, it's certainly begun to flex its muscles across pretty much every type of creative practice. And whether that's writing or animation or curation, would you believe that currently experimenting now in Bologna Civic Museum is an AI algorithm that maps people's faces when they look at artworks, discovers what their reaction is, then tries to create a whole show to give the customer exactly what they want, which is the worst way you can possibly curate anything. Never give people what they want, give them what they don't expect. But this is starting to happen already in our land, in galleries. We've got 3D art creation. There's Frida at Carnegie Mellon University that's now becoming dexterous enough to be able to paint some really quite wonderful works, actually. Architecture, 6 and 5, and some studio in Barcelona doing some amazing things. And if you get a chance to Google 3Lateral with what they've created with metahuman animation, it's just quite astonishing because tech is getting smarter, it's getting faster, it's getting better. And I've been in this industry for over 30 years, and I've never seen a pace of change in our sector like I'm seeing now with what technology is doing. And at the moment, all the inputs are human-driven, but that's only at the moment. But tonight, though, it's not just about putting the spotlight on AI and the changes it's bringing. It's also reflecting more broadly about the erosion of the arts in Australia in the past decade and the skill deficit that that's starting to create. We've seen the arts and creative industries suffer a calculated neglect, and they're not my words, those are the words of Anthony Albanese. We've seen a really, really strong push for STEM, which, by the way, is a very, very good thing and an essential thing and a proper thing. But we've also seen HEX fees for artists that have doubled over the last few years. And for me in the visual arts, I've had the rather depressing experience of watching a decline of 45% in visual arts ATAR graduates in less than 10 years. But oddly, at the same time, the World Economic Forum is pumping out data that CEOs are ranking creativity as the #1 quality or skill that they're seeking. So there's a real policy imbalance and a psychological imbalance about what Australia needs, what creativity needs, what artists needs, and everything else. And juxtapose these trends with the growth of AI, then the talk really does become about existential threats versus boundless opportunities that are impacting us almost in real time. At present, I've put in a business case to Treasury to build a new gallery on the lot next door on the Urban Orchard, because I really do think that we need a gallery that's more than something that was built in 1979 and can really only show works that are based upon the collection at that point in time. But I'm trying to figure out the balance between tech and human and what literally $1 million technical infrastructure we need to build for a new gallery. That every month I'm getting the latest update on what tech is able to do that we'd not even considered a few months earlier. And it is really difficult to try to plan in that context. But that's what we have to do. So I think it's essential for organizations like ours at AGWA to really embrace these conversations and issues, to make sure that it's actually us as creatives that are leading the discussions about the future of creativity in society and industry. Because I hate things being passively thrust upon us, whether that's government policy, whether it's private tech companies. It's our future, and it's our future that's the one that we need to create, because it's for us. And we want to be a central part of it. So this forum, it's the first of a series that AGWA will tackle some of these big issues. It is our role to interrogate these things, and I hope that we will lead in this space and guide the discussion. And the forum for me, it's a call for action, and it's a call to action, and everybody needs a voice and everybody needs to have a say. So I'd like to thank my team here at AGWA, who are fundamentally committed to supporting the emerging artists, designers and creatives to reach their full potential. And I hope from this evening that you will find some kind of real and not manufactured human emotion. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. It is such an important question, maybe one of the most important questions of our time. And now, while no one really knows what the future holds, I can give you an idea about what's going to happen over the next couple of hours. We'll begin with a keynote address by global futurist Anders Sörman-Nilsson, who's flown over from Sydney to be with us tonight. Following the keynote, we'll have a short break so you can get a drink before we begin our panel discussion. At the conclusion of that discussion, we'll have a window where you can ask audience questions. To submit one, please join us at slido.com with the Pulse Forum 23 hashtag. You should be able to see that on the screen right now. Okay, so let's get this conversation started. As Colin said, this is the first event of its kind that the Art Gallery has hosted. And as he mentioned, it comes against a backdrop of worrying statistics for the arts. He mentioned a reduction in students finishing ATAR art subjects. There's been a massive drop in specialist art, music and drama teachers in WA primary schools. And of course, we've got the impact of ChatGPT, which amazingly only came out last November, but it feels like it's already had such a huge impact on humanity. So we have to ask the question, are we looking at a future without creatives, and are we heading toward an artistic and cultural Armageddon? To help us answer that, I'd now like to welcome our keynote speaker, Anders Sörman-Nilsson. He's a futurist and founder of the think tank and trend analysis firm Think. The company's vision is to disseminate and decode avant-garde ideas which expand minds and inspire a change of heart. Clients include Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, Jaguar, Land Rover, and Lego. He's an awarded keynote speaker who helps leaders decode trends, decipher what's next, and turn provocative questions into proactive answers. He's published 3 books on digital transformation and innovation. He's the host of the Second Renaissance podcast. He's a futurist thinking has been shared by the Wall Street Journal, Financial Review, Monocle, BBC, and many more. Tonight, Anders explores our theme, An Empty Canvas, A Future Without Creatives, and kickstarts a national conversation about the importance of creative thinkers to a well-functioning society. Folks, can you give a warm welcome to Anders Sörman-Nilsson?
G'day. How are you going? Can you all make sense of my slightly weird Swedish-Australian accent, first of all? Okay, just making sure this slightly weird analog signal's getting picked up by some of the more analog and some of the more digital radio antenna. Yep, if you're an introvert, just nod. Yep, okay, fantastic. If you're an extrovert, don't hold back. All right, before we get kick-started, ladies and gentlemen, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, as a futurist, which basically means my mum has no idea what I do for a living, she calls me her son, the one who used to be a lawyer who's now a glorified astrologer. There's no one like your family to tell you what you truly do for a living. Is that just me or anyone else struggle to explain what you do to your elders and peers? Okay. Now, as a futurist, I like to claim that I'm a little bit of a traditionalist and, dare I say, maybe even a little bit of a humanist. So before we talk about some of the technologies that might make us a little bit uncomfortable, I want to just start off by taking you on a bit of a historical journey back to the past for a moment in time, to my native city of Stockholm, Sweden, to a time back in the 1910s. Nearly 100 years ago, before the pandemic of that era, the Spanish flu hit Perth, Stockholm, Sydney, other regional and urban areas around the planet. And this here was the urban vista that once upon a time greeted a man by the name of Georg Johansson, or the son of Johan, which sounds very Viking-esque, or as we'd call him here in Australia, George Johansson. As the second oldest son on the family farm, he had few inheritance rights, and as a result, he had to make his entrepreneurial, his creative, his commercial future in the cityscape of Stockholm. And his commercial opportunity in this black and white urban vista, where amazingly people only wore black or white clothing at the time, no floral pattern pocket squares hadn't been invented quite yet, his entrepreneurial creative opportunity was to dress the increasingly sophisticated Swedish gentlemen of that era. And of course, this was before facial recognition, biometric authentication, before Instagram husbands, even before selfie sticks when looking into a camera was still very much of a technological novelty. And his business, of course, was all about the belly-to-belly, the face-to-face, the personal handshake, and the seasonally adjusted girth of the Swedish gentleman, and as he opened the doors to his first bricks-and-mortar menswear store. And in a cap nod of approval to his heritage, his provenance, his family farm, as he became a man of entrepreneurship and creativity, he decided to change his surname from Johansson to the man from the southern farm, or in Swedish, Georg Sörman. He's my great-grandfather, and as you can tell, he must have been a bit of a futurist because he's got a fantastic haircut, a cool little pocket square. You could also see that we share some genealogical traits with North Korean dictators. And he invested in the technology of that era, the analog neon sign, to win the then analog hearts and the then analog minds of yesteryear's customers. But for my mother, Birgitta, who looks pretty amazing for a 106-year-old, as you can tell, we moisturize in our family, and she dresses me every day, and yes, white pants are coming back into fashion. For her, the business environment has fundamentally shifted underneath her feet, both in an era of digital disruption, digital transformation, and certainly throughout the pandemic, because the customer is behaving in a new way. Their rational, information-focused minds have fundamentally shifted. They'll still go and spend time with mum, the human in the store, but they treat it as a change room or as a showroom. Mum will tell them the stories about the family businesses from around the world that she sources her goods from, trying to win some analog hearts, but then incentivized with a 5% discount from Amazon.com/fashion over a cup of coffee or a human glass of wine with my mother. This new tech-enabled customer will say, hey, we'll think about it, and you know they're not going to think about it. They then scan the barcode for that 5% discount, go around the corner, and then order the item after exiting the store to the sound of a very lonely little bell. and order the item on mrporter.com instead. Showing, sadly, the lack of sustainability in my mum's very, very analog, humanist business model. My mum loves a pen and paper. Her version of big data is with a pen and paper measuring her SKUs like this. Now, sadly, the way she runs her business, in many ways, is perfectly prepared for a world that no longer exists. Now, can you imagine how annoying it must be to have a son who's a futurist, who goes and meddles with family businesses and the way things are done around here? A few years ago, I wrote a little love letter to my mum called Digilog, How to Win the Digital Minds and the Analog Hearts of Tomorrow's Customers, where I argued to Mum that, Mum, the future is not necessarily just about artificial intelligence, digitisation, non-fungible tokens. And we mustn't throw away the analog baby with the digital bathwater. But it's about embracing the best of both of these two worlds, of the face-to-face and the interface-to-interface. Embracing the beauty of tradition and technology, human intelligence as well as artificial intelligence. This book has the ears of Fortune 500 executives at Westpac, Australia's oldest bank. They credit the ideas in this book with them moving from number 4 in terms of retail banking customer satisfaction to number 1. Unfortunately for me, the person I wrote this love letter has not yet read the love letter. Who senses a bit of intergenerational tension, okay? Who just feels like you're part of a family therapy session so far. Thank you for listening to my woes. Sadly, during the pandemic, after 104 years in business, my parents at the tender ages of 70 and 67 had to file for bankruptcy. And my mum always points her finger at the pandemic. But I think we all know that the real challenge here, in an era where many retailers actually did very, very well, is that she hadn't digitally diversified enough. And when humans could no longer meet other humans, and when the digital touch became the most human touch in any customer journey, she'd run out of options. Now, this is my biggest shame as a futurist, my biggest failure as a futurist, is failing to get my mum to listen. But I do use it, and I utilise it with mum's permission, by the way. She gets a little kickback as a non-fungible token, sharing her beautiful story, right? But let it be a warning sign of what can happen when we don't embrace, or at least when we're not alerted by new technologies or unaware of them. It might sound like a really, really sad post-mortem, and it is. Right? Post-mortems suck. For anybody that has been in a relationship and done a post-mortem on that relationship with your therapist, you know it's too late. Hopefully you set up a better chapter for the next relationship, right? But pre-mortems are better than post-mortems, ladies and gentlemen. So the little question I want you to bear in mind, either about your career, your organisation, your future brand, is to imagine that it's now 2030 for a moment. And looking back towards now, your career, your personal brand, your organisational brand went belly up. What were the trends that you just missed? What were the signals from the future that you deliberately chose to ignore? And what were the investment decisions, either in yourself, your career, your creative expression, that you just delayed and delayed, that led to that demise? And instead, hopefully, as a result of something you hear here tonight, what change will you make today to prevent that from happening? Pandemics have had a history of being, yes, both a sad acid through society, but also a breath of fresh air. Historians have claimed that the Black Plague led to the first Renaissance, a flourishing of human creativity, innovation, a new era of humanism and art and scientific thought. By sadly and tragically killing 50% of Florence's population, what happened was that labour was in short supply. As a result, labour got paid more. As a result, peasants became artisans, artisans became merchants, and merchants became new noble men and women. And we are still in awe at some of the artworks and scientific breakthroughs, some of the literature, be it Machiavelli or Michelangelo or Da Vinci, still to this day. And I believe that fundamentally we are at the dawn today of a second renaissance, buoyed by technology, if we embrace it in a responsible and ethical manner. Just to give you some stats for those artists here in the room who actually care about numbers. According to WeTransfer, a file sharing site of Creative Works, according to them, 45.3% of creatives said they had more creative ideas during the pandemic. 88% of Gen Z's report expressing themselves creatively has aided in reducing stress or alleviating anxiety throughout the pandemic. 82% stated the pandemic has heightened their appreciation for creative activities. And of course, non-fungible tokens, despite their sort of rise and potential fall, might also be the technology that's going to be and allow us to enable us to see the digital provenance going back to a human, something we may appreciate more in an age of commoditized synthetic media, where the likes of Nina D. Schick, who advises the Biden administration on cybersecurity and synthetic media, believes that in 2025, 90% of all online content will be synthetically generated. I reckon this is going to herald the potential for human expression to be more valued in an age of commoditized AI. I also believe that is an opportunity for all of us to tune into what the Japanese in Okinawa called our ikigai. Doing something that we're good at, something that we are passionate about, something that can make us a little bit of money, but also increasingly something the world needs. And for too long, as we just heard from Colin, parents and the government has told parents and their children not to pursue their creative passions because they don't scale in your UAI, your ATAR, or your university admission. And similarly, universities are punishing students when they enroll in those courses. At the same time today, we are seeing that creativity is an absolutely essential role for founders like our local Melanie Perkins from Canva, that psychology, communications, and as a graphic design tutor, she takes that into creating a new unicorn. But similarly, a glass artist, Jim McKelvey, is the founder of one of the largest fintechs in the world, Square. We have Brian Chesky, an industrial designer who founded Airbnb, you might have heard of them. Or Evan Spiegel, CEO of Snapchat, who's also a product designer. Design thinking and artistic creative expression is absolutely key, not just to creating great enterprises that hire lots of people, but also in solving the world's biggest challenges and creating scientific breakthroughs that will hopefully enable us to solve for some of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I believe that those people who are best positioned to harness these new creative economy opportunities are the likes of polymaths and Renaissance persons, women, gentlemen, Renaissance men, like Maria Sibylla Merian, for example. She was both an artist and a scientist, sitting at the intersection of art and science and leading to new progress. She is the one that is famous for first recording Metamorphosis, painting it. And of course, this is something that's been happening with scientific breakthrough through the years. When I think of the world's largest and most pressing issues from a justice and equity perspective, I also think of them from an entrepreneurial perspective and how key creativity is to create new business models, and how little Aussie brands like Who Gives a Crap that sells recycled toilet paper, and not in that way, how creativity is key to their business model, but also how their purpose, their ikigai, taps into United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 6 around better sanitation and clean water. For every dollar of profit they make, they give away 50 cents to building toilets and sanitation projects in the developing world. By harnessing creativity. Today, we have to become more productive while treading more lightly on the planet. And I believe the fundamental definition of creativity is doing more with less, treading more lightly on the planet and having better outcomes. And certainly Who Gives a Crap is a great example of that. We saw Picasso's analytic cubism inspiring physicists like Niels Bohr to formulate some of the theses that underpin quantum physics and now quantum computing. Leonardo da Vinci's illustrations inspiring a new type of scientific surgery by Francis Wells. Art and science have always gone hand in hand, ladies and gentlemen, and we ignore the arts at the peril of scientific and certainly sustainable breakthroughs into the future. Now, creativity and artistry has always happened within constraints. We can think of Pete Mondrian's only using primary colours or 90-degree angles in his artwork. The fact that Miles Davis conceived of a kind of blue without the use of a single chord, or the fact that Shakespeare spoke, or at least wrote, in pentamic iambic. These are real constraints. And for us to solve some of the biggest global challenges today, we need to think and create within constraints, like Imogen Heap, who's a one-person ensemble. How do we use some of the creative constraints today to harness new business models and solving some of the world's biggest problems? A little Aussie brand called Zero Co. Does anyone use their products? These are plant-based cleaning products that actually work. They've reconceived the old school idea of the milkman business model. You've got your forever bottle that you refill with refills that are climate positive when they reach your door. You then send them back. And of course, all the plastic that you use in your home has been saved either from landfill or from ocean plastics. And a digital business model enables the seamless customer journey 70,000 Aussie families are now subscribing to or backing projects like this, doing more with less. This requires creative mindsets. According to my Swedish friend and colleague, Frans Johansson, sounds even more Swedish than my name, who wrote a little book called The Medici Effect, has studied why Florence was so creative. And he's coined the term of the Medici effect. The Medici family was a banking family at the time of the Renaissance. They were patrons of the arts. But they also funded schools where they combined the best of left brain thinking with the best of right brain thinkers and deliberately nurtured what are known as innovation intersections, where STEM-based thinkers of sciences, technology, engineering, and maths come together with the artistry, the creativity, the emotional intelligence, and the design thinking that led to the explosion of creativity in Florence and Tuscany that still today we are in awe of. But this also bears out in the modern economy today as well. In fact, research from our clients at Boston Consulting Group shows that organizations that deliberately harness innovation intersections from divergent thinkers, left brain and right brain, are generating profits and revenue at a faster pace than their more homogenous peers. In fact, the more diverse your organization is, the more revenue you've created from new products and services in the last 3 years than your homogenous peers. So should we tell all of our kids just to learn how to code and do sciences, technology, engineering, and maths? I know I'm preaching to the converted here, ladies and gentlemen, but we need STEMpathy and STEAM at the least to create more diversity in our organisations moving forward. A good framework to think about this in a little bit of a simplistic fashion is this idea of the left brain and the right brain. And for the last few years, AI has been fantastic at digitising and outsourcing the left brain to the bots, helping us do less of the menial and the mundane and do more of the meaningful and the humane. In a sense, taking the robot out of the human. Now, who's ever had to file an insurance claim? Sorry to raise all these traumatic experiences for you. There was probably a presidential seal, maybe some wet ink, a pigeon that you had to send away and you might not have been paid yet. Now, just have a think about how AI can do some of this process for us. And imagine for a moment if it wasn't paper-based, but AI-based, like Lemonade, a little insurtech from the United States. Now, at Lemonade, they enable you to just speak your claim into your iPhone, Samsung, or Oppo device, and through biometric authentication, you're authenticated. Then they run 21 different AI algorithms across your claim to test for fraud. They've now set a world record between the payment and the claim, 3 seconds. Who feels like this is actually more humane than anything we could have offered with a smiling human interface, a pigeon, and lots of paperwork? This, of course, is enabling us to do more with less, to liberate our creativity and do less of the menial and the mundane and more of the meaningful and the humane. And I used to think that creativity in the right brain had a longer runway until I started taking some selfies and pumping them into Lensa.ai and DALL-E. Now, the AI, gladly, as we can observe, still sucks at making hands. All right. Apparently, according to some of my artist mates, painting hands is also quite difficult. So we might be safe for a little bit longer. The question is whether this is just going to allow a new quantity of work, or could it augment our creativity moving forward as well? In the copyright strikes or the scriptwriter strikes that we're seeing in Hollywood and Melbourne, or even in the lawsuits from Sarah Silverman against OpenAI, where they're not agreeing that their unique works can be scraped and trained for these massive models, that is one way of approaching it. But we also, of course, have this interplay of cyborgism as well. What's a cyborg? A person whose mental or physical abilities are extended courtesy of new technologies. Like in this little Lexus ad, for example, where they used both neural networks, emotional intelligence data, but then a human Oscar-winning director to direct the script, the story, to win the digital minds and the analog hearts of tomorrow's customers. We have to remember in this age that content is chemistry wrapped in narrative. In other words, whether we're artists or whether we're playing around with artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, whatever we produce, create, is fundamentally brain chemistry wrapped in narrative. We have the responsibility to create artworks that lead to some kind of emotional reaction or brain chemistry, and hopefully for good. The question, of course, is whether we can trust some of the digital expressions that we're seeing emerging through synthetic media, and whether that digital nutrition is going to be mindful. Every night when my 6-year-old son, Lucian, who's got a little bit of anxiety, goes to bed, we sit down with this $3 billion app called Headspace. It doesn't cost you $3 billion to download, but that's what the company's worth. They're firmly committed to UN Sustainable Development Goal number 3, good health and mental well-being. We sit down as science fiction geeks, and he does breath work every night with Yoda. That is digital nutrition that gets him to the really human storytelling faster. So digital and technology has, up until the present time, been fairly neutral. We know the arts are not always neutral, but we know they have a massive impact, positive, hopefully, on the mental health crisis we're currently seeing today. A study conducted by the University of Oxford has discovered that online interaction with arts and culture can enhance the mental health of young individuals. It can enhance cognitive function and memory, lower the risk of substance abuse, according to a study from the University of Florida. The arts and our expression is absolutely critical moving forward. But the question is, when we embrace new technologies, which ones will we trust? What's the definition of trust? The best one that I've ever heard is from a good friend of mine at the University of Oxford, Rachel Botsman from the Said School of Business, who says that trust is a confident relationship with the unknown. A confident relationship with the unknown. And whenever a new technology emerges, we have to build a bridge between what we know and what we don't yet know. Oftentimes that happens through creative expression or human storytelling. Many artists were worried at the emergence of the camera. They thought that landscape architects or landscape artists would be made defunct. But over time, camera and photography together led to a new creative art form. It also became a great reference tool for creatives and even landscape artists at the time who found it quite useful to have a little photography as they painted at the same time. How we think about these new technologies will determine the creative opportunities in tomorrow's economy. Now, according to UBS, they are seeing that the digital democratization and digital platforms where we can buy and sell art during the pandemic also led to 40% of their buyers at places like Christie's, for example, going to an entirely new demographic and new type of buyer who previously had not bought art at all. But digitization, in fact, led to them having the opportunity to engage with the arts. We need a human in the loop with all of this, though. When Apple launched their credit card, the Apple Card, a few years ago, they proudly launched it based purely on artificial intelligence doing the credit scoring. How do you think it went? When they gave a card to Steve Wozniak, one of the founders of Apple, and one to his wife, and they, by the way, share all the same financial metrics, magically, his opportunity, his credit card limit was 10 times her credit card limit. Why do you think this was? Because the AI is biased and backward looking. No matter how much data it crunches, it looks backwards, and it holds that women, rightly or wrongly, in AI's view, was more of a credit risk. How do you think this launch went down when Steve Wozniak and his wife tweeted about what the credit card had just done or how efficient the AI was? We have to have responsible and ethical humans in the loop as we think about this. And sometimes it comes down to being bold and doing something different. Creativity is core to innovation and doing more with less. At UPS, a little delivery company that some of you might have heard of in the United States where they drive on the correct side of the road, a few years ago at an event, leadership event like this, somebody stood up and just said, why don't we just stop turning left? In Australia, read right. Why? Because we're idling too much in oncoming traffic. 22.5% of all accidents happen when you turn into oncoming traffic. We're wasting fossil fuels and we're delivering too few parcels. That human bit of insight was then, through GPS technology and RFID technology and scalable experiments, tested across the entire organization, and the results were astonishing. This is good for people, planet, and UPS profits. They're delivering more parcels, wasting less fossil fuels, saving money, and of course, they all get to hang out with humans for longer. 3 things that I'd like you to take away from tonight's presentation, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in the audience. Firstly, art and science have always gone hand in hand. Renaissance people will flourish in the near horizon future. Secondly, the world's biggest problems and opportunities require creative solutions within constraints. Creatives fundamentally understand how to do and express more by using less. Thirdly, we need a humanist ethos to reshape our future story for the well-being both of people and humans, but also the well-being of the planet. My fundamental belief today is that we are now at the dawn of a second Renaissance, a time when we can combine the best of tradition and technology, the best of human intelligence as well as the best of artificial intelligence, an interplay between man, woman, persons, as well as machinery. a combination of insights where we have the best of analog and digital working hand in hand, the physical with the virtual, for new types of stories and creative expressions. And I want to invite all of you to start preparing for that future, because it is where you, your kids and your grandkids are going to spend the rest of your lives. Thank you very much, and see you in that future.
Folks, keep that applause going for Anders Sörman-Nilsson. Now, I'd like to actually personally thank you, Anders. As a journalist, I admit that sometimes I'm guilty of focusing on the doom and gloom, and hearing you talk about the future made me feel something strange. I think it was hope. I think that's what it's called. I'll go to work tomorrow. It'll go away. It's okay. But I am going to send your mum an NFT, so in my appreciation. We're going to take a quick 20-minute break, so you'll have a chance to get some refreshments, but I'd encourage you to move pretty quickly because we need you back in your seats for 7:20 p.m. because that's when we're going to start the panel discussion. And please note, you're welcome to bring your drinks back to the concourse while the panel discussion is underway. And our AGWA design store is also open tonight. And as part of Pulse, you'll see the work of many emerging and local creatives. So don't hesitate to have a look at that. Okay, your time starts now. Okay, well, as you get settled in, I'm going to introduce our panel of speakers, and also a reminder that at the end of our discussion, we'll be taking audience questions. I'm sure you'll have loads of them. These questions can be submitted through slido.com with the Pulse Forum 23 hashtag, which should be up on the screen there again. And now, these introductions are going to take a little while because our panelists are extremely accomplished, and I'm very excited to introduce the first of them, Professor Barry Marshall. It's not every day you have a Nobel laureate in the house, unless you're Barry and you're in his house. He's also WA Life Science Ambassador and Clinical Professor at the University of Western Australia. He and Professor J. Robin Warren won the 2005 Nobel Prize for Medicine for their discovery that the germ Helicobacter pylori caused peptic ulcer disease. Professor Marshall was honoured as a Fellow of the Royal Society in 1998, Order of Australia in 2007, and a foreign member of the US National Academy of Science in 2008. In 2015, he was presented with the China Friendship Award, which is the highest award given to foreign experts, and currently he leads the Marshall Centre for Infectious Diseases Research and Training at UWA. Can I hear for Professor Barry Marshall? And sitting next to the professor is the wonderful Grace Lam, a fashion director and founding senior fashion editor of Vogue China and a board member of the Revelation Perth Film Festival. Grace has collaborated with fashion's heavyweights like Edward Enninful, Annie Leibovitz, Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell, and brands like Burberry, Dior, and Estee Lauder. She's an advocate for sustainability and menopause dialogue. Grace is a huge Formula One fan, and since moving to Perth from Hong Kong, has been officially appointed as the designated Uber driver for her son. Can we hear it for Grace Lam? And next, I'd like you to welcome Anna Louise Richardson. She's an artist and independent interdisciplinary curator living and working on a cattle farm in the Peel region south of Perth. Anna is working on a national tour of her solo exhibition, The Good, and she has had solo presentations in WA, Victoria, and New South Wales. Most recently, exhibiting with Abdul Rahman Abdullah at Fremantle Arts Centre. Alongside her art practice, she also contracts as an independent curator working with Australian art institutions, festivals, and organisations. Folks, can you give it up for Anna Louise Richardson? And next, we've got the creative powerhouse that is Ken Leung, a creative director with over 25 years of experience leading branding and image at the world's largest fashion, luxury, and media companies, including LVMH, Calvin Klein, and Monocle. Most recently, he was global creative director at Uniqlo, overseeing studios in New York, Paris, and Shanghai, and collaborating with designers such as Jill Sander, Jonathan Anderson, and then Roger Federer, MoMA, and the Louvre, as Uniqlo grew to become the world's highest valued clothing brand. Can you welcome Ken Leung? And our next and youngest member of the panel, can you please welcome Cezera Critti-Schnaars. She's an award-winning Noongar and Greek actor, in addition to being a playwright and a director. Most recently, she co-directed Seven Sisters with the West Australian Youth Theatre Company. Currently, she's working on her debut play, Salted Pretzels, which she'll be performing in as well for its premiere season at the Blue Room Theatre later this year. Folks, can you welcome Cezera Critti-Schnaars. And of course, on the end next to me, we've got Anders Sörman-Nilsson, who I think deserves a round of applause too. And now looking across this incredible panel of accomplished creatives, there's one person who's not like the others. Professor Marshall, you're a lifelong man of science. You won a Nobel Prize for medicine. I know a little bit how you won that Nobel Prize. Can you tell me how creativity has influenced your career?
Well, to be creative, I think you have to be thinking out of the box and not counting on other people to give you the ideas or show you the direction. And so what I'd say is that creativity is something that we all have, and it's just innate in humans to actually try to find stuff out. Look for sources of information, look for new information, and maybe make different patterns or different inferences from that kind of information. So if you are like your AI engine, your ChatGPT or something, you can only look back at the data that's there, the information's there. But the human mind is a bit different, can see different patterns and different possibilities perhaps that could lead to something that nobody had thought of. So you cannot extrapolate into the future by looking at what's here now. There are things that you don't know about, there are things that are going to happen. It's not linear. It often turns out to be exponential. And so that was the situation. And so my insight, if you like, was that people I met with ulcers just seemed to be normal people. They didn't have any more or less stress than anybody else. So I was never a big believer in this stress thing. But in science and in medicine, you go and look for the evidence base. So what's the evidence? And when you actually look for the evidence that stress causes all kinds of medical diseases, you'll find that in a lot of cases there is no evidence. It was just somebody thought it up and there was no better explanation way back then, and now we can test it for sure. And so that's how we went on to discover bacteria in the stomach, and people with ulcers had them, and that was great because you can cure bacteria with antibiotics. And you don't have to change people's personality or tell them to stop having stress or any of those lifestyle changes that we don't want to make. People don't want to change the way they feel and how they live. They want a cure. And there's not too many things in medicine that you can really cure. So it's definitely where we want to go in our research.
And we've heard Colin and Anders both say tonight about the push to get students to study STEM subjects, which is fantastic, and I'm sure you support that. But we've also seen, a watering down of benefits to studying the arts. What do you think about that? Do you think that's something that is appropriate as we move towards a technologically driven society, or is there a place for arts in the future?
I think it should be increased, if anything, because I know some artists and they work very hard, and it's very, if you want to be rich, don't become an artist. But actually there are other rewards, and you can get into that. So I think some of my science students, for example, end up doing art because they like that as well, and they're doing nice pictures of different kinds of bacteria, different kinds of stomach germs and things like that, but also fungi and mushrooms and all kinds of stuff. So I've got a few of their paintings and sculptures that they've done in my office. So everybody likes to do it. It's very relaxing. It's good to know that there is something that you can do. You don't need any help by other people. You can do it yourself. And it may turn out to be well liked. It may not be, but you can move on at that point. So quite commonly, you'll find people in science that like art. It's a way of relaxing, and you'll find people in art that will embrace some kind of new technology to enable them to express their art in a new way with some kind of gadget, or the Renaissance. I heard that one of the things was that people figured out how to make better paint. Years ago, remember that, I forget, it's the Madonna of Wallenberg, the little clay sculpture that somebody made out of, maybe it's out of a piece of bone or something. Well, the person or the caveman who made that figured out that he needed to have a sharp stone and the right kind of material, and could now do a sculpture. So that was using some new technology to create something that now lasted for like 20,000 years or so. So I think that's still going on. And I think artists are very interested in the new technology, so I'd like to see more emphasis in the art sphere to grab new technologies and learn enough about them so that they can enable their artistic skills, if you like. And also, I would like to see more in the STEM group and in science to actually have options for art and creativity, and we are seeing that in Western Australia. I know there's special STEAM courses in different schools. We run a thing called Micro Blitz, where we have science students go out to the schools and do demonstrations and talk to the kids about how to create things related to biology, and it all works very well. So it's happening. Unfortunately, there was a mention in the preamble of something I saw about, is it Armageddon? Well, for any of you who are my age, Armageddon was the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and we've gradually come through that in Western Australia. And hopefully people are a bit more free to think about the future. Governments should be free to fund the arts in a proper way. And I think, of course, we're all worrying about money all the time, but the bottom line is that we've got to take the long view. And where do we want to be in 20, 30 or 40 years? And hopefully we will have great art created in Western Australia, of Western Australia, by Western Australians, that people will value a lot more in the future than maybe they value right now.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, because that's what we're talking about tonight. Yeah, that's worth a round of applause. The point of tonight is to talk about the future and whether there's space for human creativity in that future. So, Grace, I'd like to ask you, you've worked with so many well-known creatives, from photographers like Annie Leibovitz, like I mentioned, performers, Hugh Grant, Jude Law, musicians, Lana Del Rey. It's a really who's who of human creativity. What do you think are some of the qualities that those people have demonstrated, that you've witnessed, that you think will still be relevant in 10 to 20 years?
Just to give you a heads up, if my mind go blank, it's my perimenopause brain fog talking, so you have to excuse me. So those people I've worked with, obviously they're very successful, and because they're very meticulous, and every job that they do or they go to, they're very well prepared, and they always have contingency plans. And they're also very flexible in what they do. So I think for the younger generation, it's a great way to learn from people like them or people like me or all of us how you plan your meeting and every single job that you go into. And also they're very good at reading the room, so they're very good at collaborating with people. And my recent encounter with the global head of Vogue, Anna Wintour, when she called me for a possible job to be the editor-in-chief of Vogue China, which obviously I declined. So for that Zoom call I did with her, she called me and she was in New York and I was here. I prepared so much to the point that I made my photographer husband, Jason, who sits in the front row here, I made him set up beautiful lighting so I look really good on the Zoom call. And he was like, why am I doing all this work? You don't even want this job. I said, because it's Anna Wintour. And also I want to give a good impression and maintain my good reputation. So sometimes even if a job that you don't want, you still need to put in your work because your reputation is on the line. So I think those are really important traits to have. And talking about in 10 or 20 years' time, will these matter? Of course it matters. Because we're innate with characters like this in order to progress as a person. while AI is useful, I don't think it can provide human interactions and human emotions. So, I mean, I think if anything we've learned from COVID is we need each other and we need face-to-face interaction, and that's what creative people do. We collaborate with each other.
And now I'm going to just quickly jump to you, Anders. So with these panelists in front of us, we've got a scientist, a fashion director, a creative director, a visual artist, and a performer and writer. Like, which of these professions do you think are most at risk with some of the challenges that the future is going to bring? Or are we all okay?
Thank you. Thanks for saving me and amplifying my voice. I feel like you're in most trouble. No, but I mean, we're already seeing in China now there's an avatar or a synthetic person that's reading the news, for example, so I'm actually serious. We need to have a talk. No, I think you guys have done a really great job of curating an innovation intersection here. I think it's the Medici effect here of very different thinkers. So who's in most trouble? I don't think any of them are in deep, deep trouble. I think yes, there's technological replacement of certain tasks in the workday, but I also feel like there's huge retraining opportunities. Even here in WA, which has been pretty reliant on mining and fossil fuels, it's not such a big retraining or re-education effort that has to go into teaching someone to move from, say, mining for coal to lithium, for example. And we need lithium for the green transition. So there's a lot of fear at the moment of everything moving from, say, fossil fuels to renewables. But there's huge opportunities for people to actually learn, relearn, and unlearn some old skills and transition to the new. So I don't think we'll see whole-scale job losses per se, but I do think our workday is going to look very, very different. I don't know if anyone here loves punching Excel spreadsheets and doing data entry all day, but one person, okay, good. But personally, I welcome AI and voice recognition and other things that can actually enable me to do less of the menial and the mundane and more of the meaningful and the human. And I think that's a really important question for anybody to ask themselves. Like, how do I? Like, we don't get paid here to sit and do data entry, right? Whether it's Barry or Grace, like, you don't get paid to do lots of data entry. Like, we pay you for storytelling and investigative journalism, and we pay you guys to tell great stories or to wear your amazing Paradiso designs, and to go to an amazing expedition that moves our hearts. So, but those stories can be amplified through the digital world as well. So, sorry, long answer.
We heard it here first. Journalism is redundant. So I'm going to become a futurist. Now, Anna, I want to ask you, so with the rise of generative AI and its impact on art, we've seen multiple examples in the news of people who've entered photography competitions and art competitions with AI-generated artworks and have either been disqualified or they've won and then they've been disqualified. Can there be art without an artist?
No. Well, from my perspective, I'm talking about being a visual artist, which is inherently the presence of the artist involved. Even if your medium is digital photography, it's created through the screen. Artistic processes and creativity exist in so many ways in so many industries, but I think it's important to make the difference between creativity and art are different things. Art is a profession, being an artist is a profession, and the creation of art is an artist's job, and I think you can't separate them. So no is my answer.
I think a lot of people here, maybe everybody, will agree with that. And now, Ken, I think any discussion about the future of art has to talk about opportunity for artists, because without those opportunities, I think it's very hard for artists to survive and thrive. And for you, you were raised in Perth, but you left to pursue a brilliant career in fashion as a producer in London, Tokyo, and New York. Why do you feel that creatives often need to leave Perth and Australia to be successful?
Hello. I think it's a mindset, and I think if I was put it down to two terms, it would be kind of an open-mindedness in the rest of the world versus, and the sense of opportunity. You know, here we are very isolated, obviously, geographically. And specifically in Perth, I think we are almost like an island. We talk to each other and we communicate with each other. We compare ourselves and our work with each other and not to the rest of the world. Like, for instance, I was speaking to a potential client about a job, and I proposed that we could help make them world-class. And he said to me, I don't want to be world-class. And that kind of blew my mind, because for me, it's like, why do you wake up in the morning if you're not, you know, comparing yourself and doing your best work and pushing that out to the rest of the world? So for me, that kind of sense of thinking here is kind of, it's good for an artist or a creative to leave and see, like when I landed in London or in New York, and I could see how people work and push themselves and are relentless, and they are pursuing, you know, pushing their art or their creativity to the nth, you know, kind of the maximum output. That's inspiring to me. And then secondly, opportunities. You know, there are companies in the world that really value the power of creativity. And companies like LVMH, for instance, Nike, they literally put on their wall, like they value creativity over other things. And those sort of companies, you know, they're super successful. And I think it's taken a while for companies in Australia and you know, other parts of the world, but to see the value of creativity, and the companies that have the foresight to invest in creative directors, chief creative officers that have that singular vision, are at the forefront. And I think they're proving that creativity can create value, can create business, and is worth investing in. So I think for me, I'm also very aware that for what I do, as you know, working in branding and working for luxury and fashion, there's only a handful of companies in the world that are probably, you know, create a position for me or be able to work for. So it's not just an Australia and a Perth issue, but I am glad that I've had the opportunity to see the way that other people create and the opportunities that are out there for someone like me.
And what would your advice be to somebody who's starting out, they're in Perth, they have big dreams of pursuing their art, whatever it might be, around the world? Is there any advice you could pass on to somebody like that?
I mean, I share a bit of my personal story, but for me, coming from Perth isn't a barrier, and that's, you know, it could be a mindset, but you shouldn't see coming from Perth as a barrier. You know, I took that as that kind of underdog mentality, and I knocked on doors, and I emailed people, I called people, I got rejected so many times, but, you know, no isn't an answer. It's kind of it's merely a suggestion, and I just kept on going and going and going. You know, you have to be able to take that rejection and be relentless. As a creator, you know, choosing to be a creative or an artist or you know, someone that works in our field is a really difficult decision, and you have to, you know, be so inherently passionate about it that you can get rejected a million times, as I still do, and to pick yourself up every day and keep on going. I think that's super important.
And Anders, like an inherently human trait, like, you know, dealing with rejection or being relentless in your pursuit of a goal, to what extent do they protect us against the skills that AI and technology offer?
Yeah, good question. I think humanity, and I think everyone in the room here has probably woken up, like you alluded to a bit earlier, in the last 6 months, or that we're at the knee of the curve of exponentiality right now with ChatGPT. In fact, there was a suggestion a number of years ago known as the singularity, which is essentially the fusion of human biology with technology, and the notion that by 2043 we will no longer just be organic biological beings, but we will be fusing with technology. And the singularity timescale holds that we are at the knee of the curve of exponentiality when things start moving really, really fast. So if we just retire today, the robots can never ever steal our jobs. We're all safe. With that view, basically the forecast a number of years ago was that 2015 was the year when the computing power would trump the brain power of a mouse, and by 2023 it would trump the brain power of a human in New Zealand. And sorry, I say the exact same thing when I'm in New Zealand working with Rugby New Zealand about Australians, because Swedes always play both sides of the fence. I think to your question is, like, with this exponentiality, I think we as humans, our resilience comes from, yes, some of the linear thinking, but I think what we fundamentally have to do is like re-embrace all the stuff we've sort of unlearned through really probably well-intended bad advice. And this is, you know, maybe I'm just biased because I was never that good at maths at school, Barry, but in the sciences were not my forte, so I'm totally biased here. But, you know, in an age of robots, like, we should be focusing more on our fundamentally human skills, like creativity, our expression, our storytelling, you know, psychology, collaboration, teamwork. All of these things are essentially things that will make us more resilient, while also being digitally literate and knowing how to work with the technology. And no doubt, just like some people started using the camera, Jason, you know, it became a new art form, right? Like, and so when we think about artificial intelligence and technology, that will also spawn new art forms, new ways of communicating, etc.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to consider. And now, Cez, you have a very interesting perspective on this panel as an early career artist. The people sitting alongside you are established, they've made their mark, and for me, my career is already over now that I know that from Anders. So I said before I had hope, now I have none again. But Cez, so you graduated from WAPA in 2018. You're working on your first show that you're going to star in, Salted Pretzels. So I guess, how optimistic do you feel about the future? Is there like an element of fear and trepidation about what it might hold, or is it just this open road of excitement and opportunity?
I think when anyone decides that they're going to be an artist, you kind of just accept living in fear for the rest of your life, vaguely, because no day looks the same, no job looks the same. I don't know what I'm doing in 6 months, let alone 6 years. But I think part of the trick of being an artist is accepting that fear and just choosing not to sit in it, but to just let it be. So I think with kind of that part of the situation aside, despite the increasing lack of funding for the arts and for specific just projects in general, and how, well, like we've talked about, the government like doesn't value the arts or isn't pushing for the arts, I'm still really excited for the arts, because how can you not be? Because because in all of history, even when it has been incredibly difficult to create art, even when it has been illegal to create art, artists keep creating art, because it is not something you just choose to do one day, it's something you have to do. I think of a story I heard, a story I heard when I was in year 12 and I was studying good old ATAR drama. We spoke about the playwright Bertolt Brecht. He was a German playwright during the rise of Nazi Germany. And he had to flee Germany because the Nazis wanted to kill him because of his art, because he He created work that sat in a term called alienation. There's a German word for it, and my drama teacher would hate the fact that I don't remember it anymore. But he created plays that made audiences aware that they were watching a play and that there was something they needed to learn. And a lot of his work was about, essentially, we hate the Nazis, they suck, why are we voting for them? And his work was having such influence that he had to flee Germany. And I think, and it would have been in his favour to not create art, to just not go there. But he did, because he had to go there. And I think for that reason, I don't think that I will ever stop being excited for what the future holds for artists, because it will always be difficult. But we're still going to keep doing it anyway.
And now, Barry, I interviewed an astrophysicist a couple of weeks ago who had a very interesting perspective on AI, because there's obviously, a lot of nightmarish predictions about the technology at the moment since ChatGPT launched last November. But he put it to me that AI has been around for a long time. Like, we've used it with Siri, and certainly scientists have used machine learning to crunch vast quantities of data that humans would take forever to do. Do you think there's a difference in the perspective between the science community and the arts community when it comes to AI? Maybe one feels more threatened than the other?
So there may be a threat in some areas, and I know in the university the faculty and integrity people are worried about what the students are doing. A lot of people are using a bit of AI. There are algorithms now that help you filter out which ones are AI and which ones are not. And it seems to me that we could still do examinations, if you like, in university. We just put everybody's telephones in a tin can as they go in, and then ask them to write an essay on something. And so I think you can get around it. I'm not particularly worried about it. I think it's overhyped. It's one of these things that, that anyone who's got a bit of a headline or a funny, interesting result from it is going to get, lots of clickbait and lots of clicks. But I saw recently there was a fabulous one that got some publicity a few months ago, that some journalists did the Harvard entry examination with AI and ran it, and they got 100% on the test and could have got into Harvard with this AI engine. Well, it's been totally debunked, and it wasn't true. They were like re-examining their own data and telling the AI engine accidentally what the answers were, and in some way it figured out where the answers were and was getting them all right. So it's got a long way to go, and I'm not particularly worried about it. My experience is that if you do run an AI with a normal question, your first paragraph's pretty good, your second paragraph is mostly good, and the third paragraph is usually absolute rubbish, as far as I can tell, on a lot of these things that I look for. So I'm not too worried about it. And it will help the bureaucracy, because often they have to write a report and they've got all the information out there, so you can just put it in and just generate a few sentences from it. But as far as being creative or original, I don't think AI is going to be there at the moment. It might show you something where you think is creative and original, but actually it came from somewhere else that somebody originally did. So I'm not too stressed about it. It'll save us a lot of time, and I'm all in favour of the 4-day week. I think we'd all live much more efficient and happy lives if we got that Monday off, because any doctor will tell you everybody always gets sick on the Monday. So I'm going to maybe start a political party where we're going to not have Monday. Okay.
I'd vote for that. And now, Grace, back when you were editing Vogue, AI wasn't an issue. It's something that's really exploded so recently. But if you were doing that job now, editor of Vogue China, to what extent do you think you would lean into the benefits that AI offers? And do you think we'll ever get to a point where readers can't distinguish between what's produced by a human and what's generated by a machine?
I mean, the beauty of, living in this society is like we put fear in each other. Humans like to scare the shit out of each other. That's the thing. In the fashion world, in publishing world, I mean, there are apps that you can use to enhance productivity and team management, Trello or Asana, that a lot of editors are using to collaborate or to make sure that a magazine runs smoothly. But at the end of the day, when you publish a magazine, we have something called flat plan. So you probably see in Devil Wears Prada, in the movie, when they put all the layout on the wall. So it's basically, a massive wall. You put like very small pictures of every single page, like 200 pages of magazine. You can see the whole flat plan, and it's so much easier to view. And because there's so much money involved, if you use AI to recreate a whole flat plan, it's never going to work. Just because every week things change, and advertisers say, oh, I'm going to put out because I don't like what you're doing, or LVMH pay another $1 million, so they want to be in the front. Things like that, you need to be physically look at it, So I don't think that is possible. And I recently read somewhere, somebody said, if a company is dumb, AI is not going to make it clever. It's just going to make it dumb quicker. So I think that's really true. Also, you can digital enhance CGI photo shoot, and you can put Naomi Campbell in Paris when she's in London. But at the end of the day, readers and audience, we want to know what the behind the scenes, the story is. And if a picture is generated by AI, it's almost like you kind of lose interest because there's no story behind it. I think that's the key. And I still remember when I was an assisting Edward Anningford, we'll be doing fashion shoot using cameras, but with films. And my husband can tell you that he used to hate going to the labs back and forth for 100 times a day just to go to the film labs to get films developed. And I remember when digital camera came out, everyone was so scared of it. Some people were loving it, but I can tell you, when we were using film, we used to do photo shoots, and we used Polaroids for each shot to make sure that everything is right, the model's nice, and the lighting is right. So a Polaroid would take 2 minutes to develop. So we would have to wait for, I don't know how many hours to look at these Polaroids, because one shot, we would use 50 Polaroids. I mean, I failed my GCSE maths 3 times, so you can do the math. So if you use 50 Polaroids, every single picture takes 2 minutes. It takes a long time to do a photo shoot. When digital came along, that just cleared that problem completely. It's almost like it's free, so people just took shitloads of pictures, and maybe 50 of them out of 2,000 is good. So I think technology, you can embrace it and make good use of it, but at the end of the day, especially in fashion, I mean, we need human interactions. And God forbid that you say to all these KOLs, we're going to cancel Fashion Week, you can't go to Fashion Week anymore. How are they going to show off the outfits? They can't, So I think in the fashion industry, we definitely, it's not going to excel as quick, I think. And I think it's more like a good collaboration is when you take technology and enhance it with fashion brands. They're like two IG pages that you guys should check out, which I love. One is called 6 and 5, and the other guy is called Andreas Risinger. So they do 3D rendering, image making, and collaborate with brands, and they create this wild dream, like unreachable kind of like image that they collaborate with, LVMH or Jacquemus, and for Jacquemus, is a French brand. They create his tiny little handbag, which is their signature handbag, and they built it into like a massive, like a vehicle that drives around Paris. I mean, physically, you could do it, but it would take a lot of money and time, right? But with rendering, it works really well. So I think that's how you can put technology and fashion as a teamwork and work well together.
Fantastic. And my takeaway as well, Grace, is that AI will just make stupidity faster. So I'm back to feeling hopeful again. And now, Anna, I've got another question for you. So, Anders, did you mention Sarah Silverman in your keynote? Yeah, I thought you did. And so for people who haven't been following this, there's a lawsuit from a bunch of American authors, including the comedian Sarah Silverman, who's suing OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, and Meta, I believe, over copyright. That their AI engines have been harvesting their data off the internet and using it to learn how to produce its own content. And it reminds me a little bit of Al Capone, the famous mobster who was undone by tax evasion. The idea that this existential threat of AI will be undone by copyright law, I think is fascinating. And so, Anna, from your perspective, what do you think should be done to protect artists from exploitive use of their IP, whether it's a writer whose stories are being taken and republished by a chatbot, or a visual artist whose imagery is being taken by a service like Midjourney?
I think it can be really overwhelming as an artist to focus on not only what you make and what you're producing, but then how you protect it. And I think the number one thing to take away is that you don't have to know, as an artist, IP law, copyright, all of those things. You just have to know who to talk to. And there are some really fantastic organisations who look after that for artists. So the Copyright Agency and also Arts Law Australia. So you can also access them through arts membership organisations like the National Association for the Visual Arts and ArtSource, and there are various state-based organisations like that. And I think that's the number one thing, is just like know who to ask for advice, and also education and investment in copyright reform so that it can keep pace with digital technologies. I think they're really important, and artists do get paid for using their images in copyright. It's actually quite a significant revenue stream for a lot of artists. And I think it's just, making sure, invest in it, educate about it, and just know who to talk to. And don't worry, it is happening. You are being protected. I think it can feel very overwhelming. I don't know anything about IP, but I do know that there are some fantastic orgs that do.
Yeah, good advice. And so, Ken, you've worked with many major brands over the years, and as some of these companies and others increasingly throw resources into the metaverse or synthetic media, do you foresee a market correction coming where consumers will want a more analogue, a more human experience? Or do you think as those digitally based offerings become more sophisticated, consumers will naturally gravitate towards that?
I think for what I do, which is fashion retail, consumers are always going to, want that tactility. They want to be able to feel the clothing, look at the fit. So that's always going to be presence there. The metaverse, brands are investing a lot into that. It's coming. You can't kind of not embrace it. You have to evolve with it. But I think they can coexist at the same time. But for me personally, putting my consumer hat on, the most meaningful experiences that I've had are all in real life, not in front of a screen. Especially, at a fashion show where you have all the tools of music and sound and smell and pace. So for me, I think that human tactility will never go away. And especially when you're creating desire to buy or to invest or to put your money towards something like clothing, you want to see it and feel it in store. So I think, to answer your question, I think that they'll coexist together, and hopefully that it's something that they'll still be able to create meaningful experiences in real life and in the digital world.
Yeah, I think it is extremely important. And now says, so I don't know if you see this, but Elon Musk today announced that he was joining the AI race. He's going to start his own artificial intelligence company called XAI. And one of his issues with ChatGPT was he thinks it's too woke because it doesn't generate racist and sexist content. He thinks that's a bad thing. And so he's promised what he called a truth GPT, an AI that was kind of unfiltered, not politically correct, and thinks that's a good thing. But we've already had discussions about the sort of responses that AI gives us from our prompts and how it might be biased against certain cultures, certain genders, certain sexualities. How concerned are you that that's going to increasingly become a problem in the future?
I think there's kind of almost two sections to the answer. One is specifically about AI putting out content that actually acknowledges other sexualities, other races, and all of that. The fact is AI is going to automatically be geared towards the mainstream, because that is, if you think about all the content we have in the world, most of it is the mainstream, hence why it's called the mainstream. And so AI will automatically falter at creating anything that has anything to do with people in the minority, whether it be sexualities, whether it be races. And I guess I can talk from a specific standpoint of being a Noongar woman, and there has been conversations raised about how AI can aid or not aid in the sharing of language and of culture, and there's been discussions about it in America and in New Zealand. And I think the fact is I guess if I speak about it specifically in terms of Noongar culture, as obviously that's what I have experience with, how can AI share a culture that us as humans are still picking up the remnants of? If we're still figuring it out, an AI certainly isn't going to figure it out. And once again, I'm just specifically talking about Noongar culture, there is such nuance and shifts in it. Like I'm not Whadjuk, I'm from Nyaki Nyaki country, so further inland. I don't know much about that culture, but I know that it will be completely different to Whadjuk. To Whadjuk, even if we think about the language, the way Pop Up there spoke language would be different to the way I would have spoken it had I learnt it on my own country. So AI is not going to be able to pick up on that nuance. And then, if we add on to that, if AI, could share language, if someone who isn't Indigenous creates an AI that has access to language and can share language, a non-Indigenous person then becomes responsible for the sharing of language. Now, if we just think back in history, when we think about non-Indigenous people having charge over how language and culture is distributed, things did not go very well. Intergenerational trauma, the loss of language, it becomes very colonial without kind of any other way of saying it. And as much as it could be looked at as a good thing, AI can learn language, it can make it easier to access, there's a reason why it is harder to access. And it's been a big conversation in New Zealand. I read a quote from an article where they said, only Maori people can decide if Siri can speak Maori. And I just think that encapsulates that all really well. Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about the bias, Elon Musk's new startup, I think, has 11 developers, all blokes, all tech bros in Silicon Valley. So I'm sure that's going to be great. And now we've got some questions from the audience, which you can still submit using slido.com, using the hashtag PulseForum23, all one word, with a hashtag on the front. I'm just going to throw these questions out. If anyone feels inspired to answer them, just have a crack. The first one. Who do you think is responsible for the decline in visual arts and emerging artists that we've spoken about today? The reduction in Year 12 students doing ATAR arts, HEX debts for art students going up, doubling in fact. Who can we hold accountable for this calculated neglect?
The state and federal government.
Boom. And what about parents? What do you think, Anders? Like, as someone who your mum is not sure what you do, not sure about your career choice, do you think sometimes, as parents, we become conditioned by this kind of prevailing wisdom that your kids have got to grow up, they've got to work in STEM, they've got to get a good job, they've got to get on the property cycle, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think. I mean, certainly in the case of my parents, they told me to either become a banker, a lawyer, or a doctor. And I think all those professions are quite heavily impacted now by AI. My dad's a military man, so everything that the government says, he believes. It's a great career move because in Sweden we never go to war. So very smart choice by him. No, but my parents are pretty traditional. They don't. I love them dearly, and but if the government says something, they're like, there must be a good reason for it. So I think many parents here in Australia go, okay, well, look at all the engineers that China's pumping out, and learn how to code because the future is about the internet. But no one goes, oh well, ChatGPT knows how to code, so all those coding jobs just went. So I think, and then parents are when they're investing crazy amounts of after-tax dollars, maybe into private schools, they're like, well, we want you to get a good ATAR score, so don't do arts because that's a bad return on investment. So there's a bit of a collusion here of, bad advice that's probably well-intentioned. So I think we just need people to think a bit more. And I mean, up in the gallery, when you're looking at some of the Year 12 art, which I had the opportunity to do yesterday, and I look at things like the artwork Boys Don't Cry or Don't Worry, Be Happy, both pretty dark but amazing expressions of creativity. Parents should be coming with their kids to AGWA and other art galleries to kind of be like, and stand in front of an artwork and be like, something going on here that we can't just see on screen, or we're not just going to think about how our kids can make as much money digging into the ground, into fossil fuels, and I think that requires a little bit more pre-mortem thinking by parents as well, to kind of go, what does the world look like in 2030 or 2040? And don't just accept traditional wisdom. Yeah,
absolutely. And now, Barry, I've got one for you here. So recent statistics, according to the person who posed this question, show that wealthier advanced economies are much more fearful of AI than developing economies. What do you think that insight potentially reveals about maybe our privilege compared to developing economies?
It probably reflects the amount of time we spend looking at screens and how susceptible we are to messages that come across there. Because AI is out there, what do you really like? Let me send you more of it. So I've got a strategy for this. I thought of it yesterday. It's a brilliant idea. You can attribute it to me. Is that whenever you are watching something on YouTube or Facebook or something like that, if you like it, give it a thumbs down. And then you will start to get some diversity and some variability in the things that are being sent to you, and you'll know what's out there. Well, at the moment, I just know, I mean, Facebook and YouTube, they know exactly what I like. And so it's actually a bit of an eye-opener. Once you start giving the things you like the thumbs down, you'll find that there's interesting stuff out there you had never heard of. And probably a lot of that could be coming from the art community rather than the science community.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I've got a great one for you, Ken. So with the new age of digital media and Web 3.0 levelling the playing field and bringing new possibilities for creatives who want to make a global impact from Perth, do you see that as something that is increasingly going to happen?
I would go back to that my thought of being relentless. Whatever. I think of technology as a tool. A lot of times, it's a tool for communication, but it doesn't change the fact that you still need to have great ideas and you still need to push them, and you still need to sell them. So wherever you are from in Perth through this technology, you still need to kind of go back to those basic values and not let kind of technology be the, be in the way or be the kind of thing that you rely on.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, Grace, so you've worked around the world, seen creatives in lots of different environments internationally. Do you think that, and this is a question from the audience, do you think Australia can be a little backward when it comes to accepting creativity or pushing the boundary?
I mean, I've only been in Perth for like 3 years and a bit. I mean, there's pros and cons in every city, don't get me wrong. I think, sorry, what was the question again? So my perimenopause
So do you think Australia can be a bit backwards at times at accepting creativity or pushing the boundaries?
Yes or no. I mean, I think it's more of an individual thing. I mean, there are great designers in Australia. I mean, in terms of fashion, there are great designers as well in Australia. But I think it's because geographically we're so far away from anywhere. I kind of didn't realize how, I mean, I know Australia is big, I didn't know it was that big. And it takes a lot to travel out to explore the world. So that's why I keep saying to my son, who's only 9, because he said to us a few months ago, I want to live with you forever. I'm like, no, you need to leave, possibly now. I said, when you're 18, you need to go and travel. I started traveling when I was like really young, because my parents were very into traveling. So I think if you can afford it, you need to go out and venture out and see what's out there. That's, unless you travel and be more worldly, then you can bring back what you've learned and back to Australia and make good use of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I've got a question here that's come in for Cez and Anna. You can both have a crack at it. I'd like you to discuss what you believe the role is of art galleries in advocating for artists and original art, which I assume they mean non-synthetic.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first? Yeah. I think this is a great question. Thank you, whoever asked it. I think that it's really important to talk about, and thank you for pointing out the difference, like the value of art as separate to the value of the image or the reproduction. So we're talking about the work and what is it. And visual arts trades in reputation and scarcity. I know, Grace, you've talked a lot about reputation, and it is completely integral to being a visual artist. And the source and the provenance of a work of art matters. And I think that's where galleries come in. They give value to the artist by actually buying the work, and they are invested in it, and they're invested in the value of that artwork continuing on. So they are, in this discussion, really important in making sure that the scarcity is maintained in terms of the value of their collection and the people who invest into that, and originally for the artist, and then the royalties if it sells on and on from that. But the other thing, and that's kind of quite an exclusive and classist view, is that the gallery has all this precious stuff. But the thing that's wonderful about a gallery with a public collection is they hold it for people to see. And you can actually come and see the work, and you can experience it in real life, and you can relate to it, and it's real. And I think that's why galleries are so important. Like, you can actually see the real thing. Otherwise, where are you going to see it? You can't afford to own it yourself. And if it's in a private collection, you have to be within the social sphere of that person or that group. So it's really, really important that public galleries, state galleries, national galleries are funded so they can continue to buy work from local, national and international artists, so that we can see it and we can actually get up really close to it.
Yeah, here. It says, you know what, I'm going to hit you with a different question, because I think Anna gave us a fantastic response to that one. So art is less about decoration, but to challenge and progress meaning in life. So what do you think is the major challenge that artists can reflect on about modern life as it is currently, that can inspire their work? As someone who, I'm assuming, takes inspiration from life, you put it into your work, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that artists can draw inspiration from?
That's a really good question. I think, interestingly enough, I think the work that is most needed right now is work that isn't only inspired by the challenges we're facing, but by the hope that we find despite those challenges, because I think something is, I say this as an artist, I do the same thing. It's so easy to only create work about what is painful, because a lot of the time that is it's the easiest thing to access. It's the closest thing to the surface for most people. But I think in some ways, the hard thing to do about creating art that talks about pain is showing the other side of that. Because if we go through life, I had a teacher once that told me art is how we process being human. And if all we create art about is the challenge of being human and being alive, then what's that going to instill in the audience who watches it? So I think in some ways that's the biggest challenge we need to be making art about, is finding the good in what is hard. Because if I take this personal, I see a lot of work about the struggles Indigenous people face. But my favourite works, my absolute favourite works, except for this one, which is phenomenal, most of my favourite works by Indigenous artists and by Indigenous playwrights are works about joy. They are my favourite works, because the fact that we still have joy despite everything is us stepping up to face that challenge. I think that's the biggest challenge, actually, that we need to work about.
Yeah, here. And so, Ken, what do you think we can do as people, as consumers, the general public who loves art, loves creativity? What can we do to preserve the authenticity of the artist, whether it's a fashion designer or a visual artist or a playwright or a musician?
Sorry, the question for me? Sorry, I missed it. Sorry.
So what can we do as consumers?
I was thinking about joy.
What can we do as consumers to preserve the authenticity of the artist, whether it's a fashion designer or a musician or a visual artist?
Authenticity is something that I think the consumer can see. They can feel themselves. So I would just to stay as true to them as possible. I think that consumers aren't dumb, and when you talk down to them, it's just a big turn-off for the buyer. So I think that just be as true as possible, and don't kind of build in kind of those layers of fakeness.
Yeah, absolutely. Barry, how do you think AI should be regulated?
I think you need to have an independent regulator without any vested interest, so people don't have shares in Facebook or anything like that. I suppose it would have to be independent away from government, because I know that around the world, governments can see a lot of value in AI. Once you can tweak the opinions of the whole country, then you really have big control over it. It's going to evolve, and I think it's banned in China or something like that. So I haven't seen it there much, but I know they've been having conferences on it. So it's very difficult to figure out how you could have AI being any use at all in a country where you've got a lot of censorship. So, you've lost the value of it, perhaps. One thing I'd like to say about the future of art and getting value out of art is that I know that since man walked on the moon, humans live 10 years longer, in Western countries anyway. So the average lifespan's gone from 72 to 82 or 83, and I saw recently so many Australians are going to live till they're 100 now. So I would say think about the long-term view, and unlike when I was coming through university or high school, you shouldn't feel quite so much pressure on you to succeed quickly, and maybe talk to your parents and say, we've got more time in our lives now, so we can do what we like and just wait to see how it evolves a bit more. And I don't have to, spend my, wonderful youth and young years hammering away to become an engineer in 4 years or 5 years or a doctor so quickly. There are other things that we can do. And tonight we've spoken about things like travel. The final thing about that was that I learned very early on from Western Australia that in Western Australia, sadly, we're not appreciated until we are visible on international CNN or some kind of international show. And so maybe that's good, maybe that's not, I don't know. But it's one thing that getting out of the country, going somewhere else, getting a credential, get some exposure internationally makes a hell of a lot of difference to how you're perceived back in Australia. And you'll see that time and time again in the media.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just add something about China
go for it, Grace.
and IP? I used to travel to China a lot for my job, and I remember one time I was in my car driving past this huge, massive billboard of Tom Ford selling real estate. So I said to my driver, I'm like, whoa, I bet they paid Tom Ford shitloads of money. And then he was like, no, they just chopped his head and put it there and CGI'd it. So there's no really like IP in China, really. Like a lot of my friends and the designers from New York or London, they sell their products in China and it gets copied and they replicate it to like thousands and millions of product and they just tweak it a little bit. And a lot of them trying to sue them, it just takes so long that they just give up, and it just got to a point that we all joke with each other, going, well, at least, if your stuff get copied, it's a compliment now, So we just have to take it like that. I think for moving forward for young designers and creatives, in order to protect your rights and IP rights, copyright, you also need to work with each other and have some kind of union or a strong bond between all of you to have a standard kind of agreement so you can work together even though you're competitors. I think teamwork is the key here to protect yourself.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll see a lot more collaboration in the arts community going forward as they face some of these challenges that we're talking about tonight. Now, we could continue for hours, I'm sure, and it looks like everybody is enjoying it and would sit there quite happily, but we have nearly run out of time. So, Anders, I'm going to give you the final word tonight. You've earned the honour. So the whole point of tonight is to talk about the future of human creativity. Is there going to be a place for artists in the future? As someone who specialises in predicting the future, can you tell us what the future will hold for creatives in Australia and Western Australia?
Yeah, good question. I think you've earned the right to have a future career as well, by the way. I think if we had an avatar on stage, I don't think all the various opinions would have been captured so well. So, cap nod to your questioning, because I think you've, litigated and investigatively, journalistically, dug out some really gold. So, maybe a round of applause for our MC here tonight as well.
I prompted ChatGPT for all of these questions tonight, so...
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't trying to skirt the question, but I do think we have to acknowledge the real human in the audience as well, or on the panel. Well, I think, oftentimes, even in the world of art and in hopefully the emergent second renaissance and the creative economy, I mean, so often we get attached to, is it sustainable, even from a dollar perspective? Can we pay the rent or whatever it happens to be? I mean, even money, it's just a made-up thing. Like, someone invented this shit, right? Like, where did this come from? And then we went, then we invented digital currencies and Bitcoin, and it's like, it's all just an idea. So even, this thing that we, look at, balance sheets are a made-up thing. So it's all creativity. It's all just, in our minds. This starts sounding a little bit like Inception, like a dream within a dream. But I think oftentimes creatives, artists, maybe accept foreign currency instead of dollars. And foreign currency, I mean, the emotional applause and, the recognition and maybe, the winning of awards and stuff, which I think is, which is fantastic, but then you've still got to pay the bills. So then maybe artists need to have some more conversations with entrepreneurs and think about, how do we actually charge for this? What you do with the money is up to you, but I think new business models need to emerge, and someone like Imogen Heap, who I mentioned in my keynote, has been quite a leader in terms of how she's charging for her music and releasing songs on the blockchain very early on, and even the idea of non-fungible tokens, etc. Like, these are, I think when you find that intersection between creativity and then actually charging for it and being comfortable charging for it as well, deep down in your soul, because we all go, oh, we're creatives, like we shouldn't charge for this stuff. This stuff should be in a public place, and it should be, but like you also need to be able to put food on the table. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
Get that money, everybody.
Well, I think it's get the money to make it sustainable, because even if you're an artist, you also need to think of yourself a little bit like a business, and look after people, planet, but also some profits, and then you get to decide how to reinvest it as well. But use technology to help you make your business, your craft sustainable into the future. So.
Fantastic. Okay, folks, now because this is the first event of its kind here at AGWA, we really want to get your feedback from tonight's Pulse Forum. So you received an email post-event. Let us know your thoughts, because we'd love to do more of these in the future. You'll be able to rewatch or share tonight's recording of the forum. It'll be on the AGWA website. And if you've had a drink tonight, please take your glassware back to the bar. Otherwise, they'll make me do it. And make sure you get home safely. And can you please put your hands together for our fantastic panel tonight: Anders, Cezera, Ken, Anna, Grace, and Professor Barry Marshall. It's been my absolute pleasure to MC for you tonight. Everyone, please get home safely, and we'll see you at the Art Gallery soon.